April 5, 1933. Mark that date in blood. It was the day the land of the free became the land of the confiscated. With the stroke of a pen, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. In an instant, the foundational wealth of the American citizen, gold, was criminalized. You were given a simple, brutal ultimatum. Turn in your life savings to the Federal Reserve within 30 days, or face the wrath of the state. We are talking about a $10,000 fine and 10 years in a federal cage. 10 years of your life gone, simply for possessing a piece of nature's money. And the terrifying part? The sheep complied. They lined up at the banks, heads bowed, handing over their coins, their bullion, their future. They traded real wealth for paper promises, accepting the government's fixed rate of $20.67 an ounce. They did it because they trusted the system. They bought the lie that this was a temporary sacrifice to save the nation from the Great Depression. They thought they were patriots. They were actually victims. Fast forward 9 months. The trap snapped shut. Once the government had secured the nation's gold, Roosevelt arbitrarily revalued it to $35 an ounce. A 69% price explosion. Overnight, the government successfully stole nearly half of the citizenry's purchasing power, legalized theft on a grand scale. And the people? They could do absolutely nothing. Owning the asset was now a felony. Do not make the mistake of thinking this is a dusty chapter from a history textbook. This is not the past. This is a blueprint. And right now, in 2025, that blueprint is being dusted off, updated for the digital age, and deployed against you. The asset has changed, but the mechanism is identical. Look at the evidence. Look at the new executive orders surrounding the strategic Bitcoin reserve. It uses the exact same terminology as EO 6102, national security, strategic asset, mandatory acquisition. They aren't embracing crypto because they love freedom. They are building the legal cage to confiscate it. They are preparing to wipe out $37 trillion in debt by seizing the only thing you own that they can't print. This time, they aren't coming for your gold bars buried in the garden. They are coming for your Bitcoin. They are coming for your digital sovereignty. In this briefing, I am going to declassify the playbook. I will show you the mechanics of the 1933 heist, prove how it is mirroring perfectly into 2025, and expose the surveillance grid they have built to ensure you cannot hide. Listen to me closely. Once the order is given, once the revaluation strikes, there is no undo button. You will either be positioned to weather the storm, or you will be wiped out completely. Let's begin. To understand the trap set for you today, you must understand the desperation that fueled the theft of 1933. History doesn't just rhyme. It stutters when the debt gets too high. Back then, America was gasping for air in the suffocating grip of the Great Depression. A quarter of the workforce was idle. Banks weren't just struggling, they were evaporating by the thousands. The United States was drowning in the hangover of World War I debt. At that time, the debt-to-GDP ratio sat at roughly 40%. To modern ears, desensitized by today's absurdity, that sounds like a fiscal paradise. But you have to remember, in 1933, the dollar wasn't magic paper. It was a claim check on physical gold. Every bill in your pocket promised redemption in precious metal at $20.67 an ounce. This gold standard was a leash on the government's power. As faith in the banking system disintegrated, the public did the rational thing. They ran to the banks and demanded the metal. They didn't want paper promises, they wanted the truth. This caused a hemorrhage in the Federal Reserve's vaults. The gold was flowing out, and because the money supply was tied to that gold, the government couldn't simply print its way out of the crisis. The economy was in a deflationary death spiral. Prices crashed. Wages vanished. Roosevelt faced a binary choice: allow the system to correct and face total collapse, or break the shackles of the gold standard to print unlimited money. But he couldn't just tear up the gold standard publicly. It would induce panic. He needed a sleight of hand. He needed to steal the gold first. This is where the genius of the tyranny lies. They didn't frame it as theft. They framed it as patriotism and monetary stability. When EO 6102 dropped, it commanded every soul in the nation to surrender their gold coin, bullion, and certificates to the Fed by May 1st. Sure, they left you crumbs. You could keep 5 meager ounces or gold for dental fillings, but the bulk of American savings was targeted for extraction. The punishment was designed to terrify. A $10,000 fine in 1933 is equivalent to nearly $250,000 today. Combined with the threat of a decade in prison, the message was clear. The state owns your wealth. You are merely holding it until they want it back. And because the average citizen still suffered from the delusion that the government was benevolent, they complied. They walked into the slaughterhouse voluntarily. What happened next is the part the history books glaze over, but it is the most critical lesson for us today. After the May deadline passed, after the vaults of the Treasury were bursting with the confiscated wealth of the people, silence followed. They waited. They let the gold sit there for 9 months, until January 1934. Then came the Gold Reserve Act. This legislation transferred ownership of the Federal Reserve's gold to the U.S. Treasury, effectively nationalizing the money supply. And then, Roosevelt pulled the lever. He announced the new official price of gold, $35 per ounce. Do the math with me. They bought it from you at roughly $20. They revalued it to $35. That is a nearly 70% markup. By simply changing a number on a ledger, the government created nearly $3 billion in new equity out of thin air. In the context of 1933, where the entire federal budget was barely $6 billion, this was colossal. They fabricated value equivalent to 43% of their annual budget just by lying about the price. But the real magic trick was on the debt. The U.S. government's debts were denominated in dollars. By devaluing the dollar against gold, by making it take more dollars to buy the same ounce, they effectively torched 40% of their debt load. They transferred the burden of their mismanagement directly onto the backs of the savers. The citizens who obeyed the law were decimated. They surrendered an asset that would have protected them. Instead, they were left holding devalued paper while the government sat on a mountain of revalued gold. And to add insult to injury, gold ownership remained a crime for another 41 years. Until 1974, the land of the free prohibited its people from protecting themselves with sound money. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't emergency management. It was a calculated wealth transfer. It was a heist. And if you think they won't do it again because times have changed, you are sleepwalking into the buzzsaw. Why is this happening now? Why 2025? Look at the scoreboard. It's not just bad, it's terminal. In 1933, the government panicked over a 40% debt-to-GDP ratio. Today, we are staring down the barrel of 132% debt to GDP. We are sitting on a mountain of $37 trillion in national debt. The situation is more than 3 times worse than the crisis that triggered the original confiscation. The interest payments alone, just the cost to service this debt, have eclipsed $1.2 trillion annually. We are spending more on interest than we do on the entire defense budget. We are spending more on interest than on Medicare. And with interest rates stuck at 5%, that number is compounding like a virus. By 2027, we could be looking at nearly $2 trillion a year just to keep the lights on. There is no way out of this mathematically. You cannot tax your way out of it. Even if you confiscated 100% of every worker's salary and 100% of every corporate profit, you wouldn't clear the ledger. You cannot grow your way out of it because the debt is expanding faster than the economy ever could. There is only one lever left to pull. The same lever Roosevelt pulled. Financial repression, confiscation, revaluation. But here's the problem. Gold is no longer the center of the financial universe. It's too heavy, too slow, and frankly, the government already owns most of it. They need a new asset class with massive appreciation potential to absorb the collapse of the dollar. They need something that moves at the speed of the internet. They need Bitcoin. On January 23, 2025, the trap was set. The executive order establishing the strategic Bitcoin reserve was signed. The media cheered. The crypto bros celebrated, thinking this was the moment of mass adoption, the moment Bitcoin went to the moon. They are celebrating their own funeral. Read the text of the order. It is a carbon copy of 1933. It defines Bitcoin as a strategic asset vital to national security. Do you understand what that phrase means in legalese? When something is a matter of national security, the Constitution is suspended. Due process is suspended. The government grants itself the authority to seize, control, and regulate that asset by any means necessary. The order authorizes the Treasury to acquire and hold Bitcoin. It directs agencies to build the management infrastructure. They are not buying Bitcoin to make you rich. They are buying it to corner the market. This is Phase 1, the legal framework. It establishes the precedent that the state has a primal claim on the digital asset ecosystem. They are selling you the narrative of American innovation and financial leadership. But beneath the marketing slogan lies the machinery of seizure. They are setting the stage to erase $37 trillion of mistakes by stealing the value of your digital property. Here is where the nightmare gets darker. In 1933, enforcement was analog. It was messy. Gold is physical. You could bury it in a mason jar in the backyard. You could hide it in the walls. You could give it to a trusted neighbor. The government didn't have the manpower to kick down every door in America. They relied on fear and voluntary compliance. 2025 is different. You are fighting a digital enemy. Bitcoin, by its nature, is a public ledger. But the on-ramps and off-ramps? Those are the choke points. Every time you bought Bitcoin on Coinbase, Kraken, Binance US, or Gemini, you created a permanent record. You handed over your driver's license, your social security number, and a selfie. That is KYC, know your customer. In reality, it is know your victim. Those exchanges are not your friends. They are deputized informants for the IRS and the Treasury. The government already has the database. They know exactly how much you hold. They know when you bought it. They know where you sent it. In 1933, they had to ask you to bring the gold in. In 2025, they can simply send a digitally signed letter to your email. Citizen, our records indicate you possess 2.5 Bitcoin. Under the new executive order, you are required to liquidate these assets to the Treasury wallet listed below within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in the freezing of your bank accounts and a felony warrant for your arrest. They don't need to come to your house. They can execute the confiscation remotely by freezing your ability to participate in the financial system until you bend the knee. The strategic reserve isn't just a vault, it's a panopticon. We are watching a slow-motion demolition. Based on the 1933 playbook and current indicators, here is the sequence of events. Phase 1 is already complete. The legal framework is signed. The concept of Bitcoin as a state asset has been normalized. Phase 2 is happening now. Stealth accumulation. The government is quietly soaking up supply. They aren't just buying on the open market. That would spike the price too early. They are using the Department of Justice to seize coins from criminal enterprises. The Silk Road coins, the Bitfinex hack seizures. The U.S. government is already one of the largest Bitcoin holders on Earth. They are also likely mining it, utilizing the massive energy output of federal dams and nuclear sites to generate coins off the books. Phase 3 is the crisis and mandatory acquisition. This is the pinch point. Sometime around 2026 or 2027, the debt ceiling war will go nuclear. Bonds will crash. The dollar will teeter on the edge of hyperinflation. In this chaos, the president will declare a financial state of emergency. They will announce that to save the dollar and protect American sovereignty, all private Bitcoin holdings above a nominal amount, let's say 0.1 BTC, must be sold to the strategic reserve. They will offer you a fixed price, maybe $50,000, maybe $80,000. It will be well below the true market value. You will be forced to sell your hard asset for depreciating fiat currency. If your coins are on an exchange, they will be taken automatically. If they are in a wallet associated with your KYC identity, you will be coerced to send them. Phase 4 is the revaluation. This is the endgame. Once the Treasury controls the supermajority of the domestic Bitcoin supply, let's say they hit a target of 1 to 2 million coins, they will reprice it. They will announce that Bitcoin is now valued at $1 million or $2 million per coin on the federal balance sheet. Suddenly, the U.S. government's assets skyrocket. The debt-to-equity ratio stabilizes. The books are balanced through accounting alchemy. Meanwhile, the dollar in your pocket collapses. If Bitcoin goes to 1 million, the purchasing power of the dollar relative to real goods craters. You have been robbed of the upside, and you are left holding the bag of hyperinflation. This is the wealth transfer. From the middle class to the state. From the private sector to the public sector. The survival guide, evading the dragnet. I am not here just to spread doom. I am here to give you the map through the minefield. Survival is possible, but it requires action now, not when the letter arrives in the mail. 1. Immediate self-custody. If your crypto is on an exchange, you do not own it. You own an IOU from a company that will fold the second the government applies pressure. You must move your assets to a hardware wallet, cold storage. A ledger, a treasure, a cold card. When you hold the private keys, you hold the power. Taking it off the exchange removes the immediate seize button the government has. 2. The plausible deniability factor. Yes, the exchanges have records that you bought crypto. But if you move it to a private wallet, the chain of custody becomes murky. If the government comes knocking, you have options. Perhaps you lost the private keys. Perhaps you fell for a phishing scam. Perhaps the hardware device was destroyed in a boating accident. Proving you still have access is infinitely harder for a prosecutor than proving you once bought it. I am not giving you legal advice. I am telling you that possession is 9/10 of the law, and obscurity is your shield. 3. Non-KYC acquisition. Stop feeding the database. If you are still buying, look for peer-to-peer avenues. BISC, HODL, Bitcoin ATMs that don't require ID scans. Mining is another route, converting electricity directly into sound money without a corporate middleman reporting you to the IRS. Every Satoshi you acquire without an ID is a Satoshi that doesn't exist in their database. 4. Jurisdictional arbitrage. The United States is the eye of the storm, but the whole world isn't sinking. There are jurisdictions that still respect property rights. Singapore, Switzerland, El Salvador, certain Caribbean nations. Creating a legal structure offshore to hold assets is complex, but for those with significant means, it is the firewall. It places your wealth outside the immediate reach of U.S. executive orders. 5. The real asset hedge. Do not be 100% digital. If the power goes out or the internet is firewalled, you need tangible value. Productive farmland. Real estate in resilient communities. Commodities. Physical gold, stored privately, never in a bank's safety deposit box. Remember, banks were closed in 1933. These assets float when the dollar sinks. They cannot be deleted with a keystroke. I can hear the skeptics screaming. They can't ban Bitcoin. It's decentralized. Stop being naive. The Bitcoin network is decentralized. Your compliance is not. The protocol will keep running. Yes, blocks will be mined. But if the U.S. government says owning it is a felony, 99% of the population will fold. They don't need to shut down the blockchain. They just need to terrify the users. But the innovation. America will fall behind China. Do you think the deep state cares about innovation more than its own survival? When the choice is between the death of the dollar and the suppression of a tech sector, they will choose the dollar every single time. Power protects power. They will crush the industry to save the sovereign bond market. There would be riots. Just like there were riots in 1933? No, wait, there weren't. People stood in line. Just like there were riots when they bailed out the banks in 2008? No, people watched TV. Just like the backlash against printing 40% of the money supply in 2020, the masses are complacent. They will believe the propaganda that greedy crypto hoarders are causing the inflation, and they will cheer when your assets are seized. We are in the accumulation phase, 2025. This is the calm before the storm. The crisis phase is going to hit in 2026. The bond market breaks. The confiscation phase follows in 2027. By 2028, the new normal is established. The dollar is a husk of its former self. The middle class has been leveled, and the government has reset its books. This is not speculation. This is the logical conclusion of a mathematical impossibility. The debt cannot be paid. It must be defaulted on or inflated away. They have chosen inflation via asset confiscation. History is a brutal teacher, but it offers a passing grade to those who pay attention. The people who surrendered their gold in 1933 and held onto paper dollars were annihilated. They lost nearly all their purchasing power over the subsequent decades. But the minority, the ones who saw the writing on the wall, who hid their gold, who moved funds offshore, who held tangible assets, they didn't just survive. They built dynasties on the ashes of the old system. We are standing at that same fork in the road. The executive order for the Bitcoin reserve is your warning flare. It is the signal that the wealth transfer has begun. The legal trap is set. The database is populated. The debt bomb is ticking. You have, at best, 12 to 18 months before the window slams shut. Once the mandatory sale order is broadcast, once your exchange account is frozen, it is too late. You become a casualty of the state. You must act while you still have agency. Move to self-custody. Diversify out of the system. Harden your defenses. The great heist of 2025 will make 1933 look like a practice run. The technology makes them omnipotent, but your foresight makes you dangerous. Do not be a victim of the pattern. Be the anomaly that survives it. I will be tracking every move the Treasury makes. I will be decoding every new regulation that drops. If you want to survive what is coming, you need to be subscribed to this channel. I will serve as your early warning radar. This is not financial advice. This is a survival briefing. The state is coming for your wealth. The only question remains, will you be holding the bag or holding the keys? The choice is yours. Make it now.